I wasn't born into roars or darkness. I was born into the perfect silence of the meadow, where the wind blows only as a thin lullaby. My mother lay down, breathing in heavy bursts. Her wool was matted with dirt. The night grass was wet with dew. Above us, a star-filled sky that gave no warning of danger. I slipped from her body like a small, cold white drop on the ground. In the first seconds of my life, I didn't know how to stand, didn't know how to find my breath, didn't know fear. I only knew cold. A biting chill ran from my chest to my legs, making my whole body tremble like a leaf clinging to its branch in a gentle breeze. But lambs are not granted the privilege of weakness. We must stand immediately. If we cannot stand, we will not survive half a day. Mother didn't warn me for long. She licked away the birth membrane, nudging me insistently with her nose. Stand up, at all costs. My legs felt like 4 brittle stalks of dry grass, too weak to hold anything. I slid, collapsed onto the earth. I tried again. My limbs shook as if they would snap, but I continued. On the 5th attempt, my knees locked for a single breath of time. I stood, unsteady, but standing. In the meadow, that is the first true sign of life. I lifted my head and saw my mother looking at me, not with joy, but with relief. Sheep do not celebrate. Sheep simply continue living. When the sun rose, the flock came near. The adult sheep circled around us like a silent white wall. No bleating, no lowering of heads, but in their eyes was something other species rarely understand. A new lamb in the flock means one more life to protect. In a world with no kindness for those at the bottom of the food chain, the night had been gentle. Life would not be. I didn't know that yet, but the morning wind, slipping through the meadow grass, sounded like it was trying to warn me. Grow fast. Don't believe this peace will last. I didn't grow up through strength. I grew up through startle after startle. Creatures like us are not born to fight. We are born to sense danger before it even knows its own name. And that lesson came early. On the 3rd morning of my life, I saw the flock react to something I could not see. No roar, no predators, shadow, no movement in the grass, only the wind changing direction. My mother turned her head instantly. The entire flock pivoted with her, so perfectly synchronized it felt like a single body moving. I didn't understand what was happening, but my legs were already running before my mind caught up. A sheep's fear does not come from what it sees. It comes from the moment the entire flock turns at once. I pressed against my mother's side. Her breath was heavy. My heart beat faster than my hooves. I looked back. There was nothing, but I understood. If you wait until you see the danger, you're already too late. The next day, the lesson became clearer. We were grazing in silence when the air shifted. Not the smell of nature, the smell of wet fur and hot flesh. Wolves. I had never seen a wolf, but my body recognized it from the way the meadow trembled as the adult sheep tightened together. An old ewe gave a deep, low bleat. Not a warning. An order. All lambs were to move to the center. My mother grabbed me by the scruff and placed me between warm, shaking bodies. I was trapped between legs that trembled, but stood firm. No one protected themselves. Everyone protected the young. I heard the wolf howl from afar, not the sound of an attack, the sound of something saying, "I see you." What frightened me wasn't the howl. It was the flock's silence. Every sheep froze. No running. No bleating. No mistake. And then the wolf left. No chase. No blood. No screams. But I understood. We survived not because of luck, but because of discipline. Sheep survive not through strength, but through the ability to become one single creature when danger appears. That night, My mother lay closer than usual. She didn't speak, but I knew why. Sheep are not allowed to forget what almost killed them. I looked up at the night sky and realized peace is never guaranteed. Peace is the brief pause between countless threats we cannot defeat. From that day on, I understood. For a sheep, growing up isn't learning to be strong. It's learning to fear at the right moment, so you can live the longest. There are predators we sheep understand instantly. Wolves, sharp scent, quick but silent steps. Jackals, thin breaths, eyes low to the ground. Eagles' shadows gliding fast without stirring the wind. But there is one thing that my instincts never learned how to respond to. Not a predator, not nature, not obvious danger, yet carrying an unease that seeped into the grass, the soil, the wind. Humans. I remember that moment clearly. The flock was moving toward the lower valley, where the grass grew greener and the water flowed softly. My mother walked beside me far enough for me to learn, close enough that I could touch her shoulder with just a tilt of my head. Then the flock stopped. Not because of a roar, not because of blood, but because the earth no longer vibrated the way it should. The earth has its rhythm, the sway of grass, the breath of wind, the steady cadence of heavy hooves. But this time, the ground carried a different beat, light, scattered, uneven, yet deliberate. Not wolves, not deer, not anything the flock had ever faced. I lifted my head and saw them, tall figures, standing on two legs, not running, not stalking, not howling, not waiting to ambush. One of them raised a hand to block the sun, a harmless gesture, yet it stretched a silent tension through the flock, like an invisible rope pulled tight. No animal scent, no growl, no predator's eyes. But their eyes were focused, not on the flock, on individuals, choosing, selecting, and that made my wool stand on end in a way nothing ever had before. A sound rang out, not an animal sound. Metal against metal. The entire flock pivoted. Not a single sheep broke formation. No one chose for themselves. We turned as one, a white gust of wind. I ran on instinct, legs still young, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst free. My mother ran beside me, her eyes never leaving the figures behind us. I looked back. The humans did not chase. They just watched, and that was the most terrifying part. Predators chase, but humans wait. There was something in their eyes that looked like calculation, measuring, comparing, deciding which one of us was suitable. No predator on the meadow had ever looked at us that way. Only humans. That night, I didn't sleep tucked against my mother like usual. I stood beside her, silent for a long time. Not because I feared their eyes, but because I feared something we sheep were never taught to handle. Danger that has no shape, yet moves closer all the same. Sheep are born to flee from wolves. But what do you do when the creature before you doesn't chase, doesn't roar, doesn't cause chaos? What do you do with something that doesn't want to eat you, but wants to decide your future? I didn't know, but I understood one thing. The moment humans appear, the meadow is no longer harmless. I grew up faster than I expected. My wool grew thicker, softer, and heavier in a way I didn't understand. I thought it was a sign of maturity, but in truth, it was a sign of value in the eyes of humans. Not the value of life, the value of what grew on my body. That day came in the early morning. The flock was standing still on an open patch of dirt, the sunlight still young, the wind brushing through our wool like the gentle hand of the meadow. Then came a sound familiar, yet not from instinct. the clacking of wooden hinges opening, not a door of nature. The gate of a pen. Humans entered. No weapons, no stalking, no threat. And that was exactly what frightened us. Predators always send warnings before they attack. Humans do not. They simply approach. One of them placed a hand on my back. I flinched, stepping back half a pace. No growl, no howl, no imminent danger. Yet the feeling in my chest was the same as the day I first smelled wolves. No tearing of flesh, but there was control. No obvious danger, but there was intention. They did something I never imagined could happen. They chose me. Not my mother, not another sheep in the flock. Me. They separated me from the flock with a soft rope looped around my neck. No pain, no injury. But I understood immediately. This was no longer nature. This was ownership. My flock did not react the way they did with wolves. No one cried out. No one bolted. They simply watched, not because they abandoned me, but because this was something no sheep could fight. We can resist predators, but how do you resist something that does not want to eat you? I was led through the gate, away from the warm circle of wool, breath, and synchronized footsteps. No sheep bleated. No hooves stamped. Sheep do not cling, do not plead, do not rebel. We only understand one painful truth. From the moment humans appear, we are no longer sheep of the meadow. We are sheep of their world. Outside the pen was a small yard. They led me toward a long table, covered with tools my nose could not categorize. Sharp metal, small knives, and something with wheels used for pulling. My mother once told me sheep are not killed for their wool, but she never told me that, to take the wool, they would do something that made me lose a part of myself, a part I once believed was simply my body. I was held firmly, hands steady, gentle but allowing no retreat, and for the first time in my life, I understood that some fears do not come from pain, but from realizing your life no longer belongs to you. I wasn't dragged like prey. I wasn't shoved down like an enemy. I was simply placed on the ground, so gently that it frightened me even more. Sheep are used to threats that make noise, dangers with claws, predators with hungry eyes. But humans do not use teeth, do not use claws, do not use brutality. They use understanding, and understanding is the one thing my kind can never fight. They held me on my side, not squeezing, not hurting, but firmly enough that I knew any struggle would be pointless. I didn't bleat. Sheep do not cry out from fear. We only cry out from pain, from being eaten, or from being torn away from the flock. But this was none of those. It wasn't separation. It wasn't predation. It was something my instincts had never been taught to confront, being harvested. The first blade touched my belly, not the sharp knife of slaughter. A shearing blade designed to take wool, not life. It didn't hurt. It just felt cold. Cold deep enough to reach the skin. My white wool had been my armor, my warmth, the place where the wind rested, the thing that made me belong to the meadow. And it fell, piece by piece, like fragments of childhood being cut away from my body. I watched the wool pile up, white as clouds, but I did not see beauty. I saw something leaving me forever. When they reached my ribs, I began to tremble, not from pain, from nakedness. Sheep have no fangs, no speed, no sharp horns like goats, no muscle like larger beasts. We have only two defenses, our wool against the cold and our flock against fear. That day, I had neither. When they released me, I stood up immediately, not to run, but because standing was the only way left. to feel like I was still an animal, not an object. The midday wind touched my exposed skin. For the first time, I learned a wind can be so cold, it makes your heartbeat falter. I didn't recognize myself. No familiar weight. No protective layer. No softness that belonged to me. I stepped out of the yard, and just beyond the pen gate, the flock was waiting. None came close. But their eyes didn't judge. They simply mourned. Sheep cannot speak emotion, but I understood what my mother's silence meant. Every sheep must go through this, and you will go through it many times if you want to survive. That night, I lay against my mother more closely than ever, not because I feared predators, but because I feared the feeling of losing something that was mine, with no way to keep it. For the first time, I understood. Some things break a sheep not from the outside, but from the realization that its life is no longer its own to control. I grew quickly. My skin thickened. My wool grew back, but never the same as the first time. I thought the fear of being shorn would be the worst thing I'd ever face. I was wrong, because wool is something they take seasonally, but freedom is something they take for a lifetime. I realized that on a morning that looked ordinary, the flock moved toward the outer pasture, the one where we were usually let out to graze. I walked beside my mother, not as close as when I was young, but close enough to hear her breathing beneath her thin layer of wool. But that day, as we neared the gate, the ground did not smell of dew. The wind did not smell of meadow. There was only a strange scent, fresh-cut wood, newly fixed metal, and human footprints thicker than usual. When we reached the gate, I understood why. The gate wasn't open, not because they forgot, not because it was broken. They simply didn't want to open it anymore. The flock stopped. A few old sheep stepped forward, sniffing the wooden bars. My mother stood closer to me, but no one pushed the gate. No one kicked. No one bleated. Sheep do not fight wood and iron. We only stand and wait. Hope. Hope the gate will open like every time. Hope the humans are just repairing something. Hope the pasture still belongs to us. But hope is the most fragile thing a sheep can possess. Then they appeared. 3 men walked out from behind the trees. No guns, no traps, no intent to kill. They brought something far more frightening, the intention to change our lives. They walked past us without malice, but their eyes carried a message even instinct could decipher. From today on, you will stay in here more than you go out. No more free grazing. No more wandering far. No more open fields. No more wind leading the way. Only fenced yards, feed scattered by their hands, and routines we did not choose. On the first day we were kept inside, even the air felt different. No long footsteps brushing over grass. No scent of fresh earth. No feeling of wind touching my legs as I climbed a hill. I walked to the gate, not to escape, just to look outside. I didn't run. I didn't push. I just stood, and the longer I stood, the more I understood why sheep stopped being wild when living with humans. Humans don't take our lives. They take our ability to choose. That night, the flock slept closer together than usual. There were things we could not say, but every one of us knew. When wolves chase us, we run. When we're separated, we cry. When our wool is taken, we endure. But when our freedom is taken, there is no instinct left to use. It is fear without a shape, a silent fear, slipping into each breath, each step, each passing day, with no one knowing when freedom will return, or if it ever will. Humans do not attack us with growls. They do not chase us with pounding footsteps. They do not shake the earth like large predators. They separate the flock with calmness, and that calmness is sharper than any wolf's teeth. That morning, the sky was clear and the wind gentle. The flock stood around the fenced yard, no panic, no pushing. I thought today would be like every other day we'd been confined. Eat, stand, wait. But the humans opened the gate. Not wide, not for all of us, just enough for one sheep to step through. They called a name our kind cannot understand. Human sounds are not meant for sheep, but we understand meaning through action. A large sheep, its back shorn many times before, stepped forward where their hand pointed. It didn't run. It didn't resist. It didn't look back at the flock. Strangely, it walked as if this was something it was meant to do, as if the humans had taken even its instinct to react. The gate closed behind it, a tiny click, but inside my chest, it sounded like rocks collapsing into a ravine. The flock stood still. No movement, no bleeding. No one called out in the voice of our kind, only silence. And the silence of sheep is how we recognize the truth we cannot avoid. That one will not return. Not because it will be eaten, not because predators took it, but because humans have decided so. An hour passed, then two. Then the sun stood straight in the sky. No returning footsteps, no familiar scent drifting through the fence, no white shape appearing at the gate. By evening, the flock lay close together, but there was a strange empty space in the circle. No one spoke. No one asked. Sheep have no sound for this kind of loss. A loss with no body, no blood, no cry. It is the kind of loss only humans create. Separation without explanation. That night, I did not sleep. I stood staring at the sky, thinking about the sheep that had been taken. I tried to catch its scent riding backward on the wind. Nothing. I pressed my ear to the ground to feel for familiar vibrations. Nothing. I looked through the cracks of the gate, hoping to see a shape returning. Nothing. And I understood a truth no one had ever taught me. A wolf can kill a sheep, but a human can remove one from its world without leaving a single trace for the flock to know where it went. And that is the most terrifying kind of death for sheep. A death with no sound, no body, no evidence, only disappearance. From that day on, I no longer looked at the gate with the curiosity of a young lamb. I looked at it the way one looks at a silent abyss, quiet, open just wide enough to swallow a life, then closing again as if nothing ever passed through. I once thought I had grown used to watching others disappear, used to the wind slipping through the empty space they left behind, used to a kind of absence that no one names. But no one truly becomes used to it. Some fears make your heart shrink just by watching from afar. But some fears only become real when they call your name. And that day came for me. That morning, the humans arrived earlier than usual. They brought no food, no shearing tools. They simply stood and watched the flock, their eyes moving over each of us, as if choosing something we had no right to know. I stood beside my mother, no longer pressed against her like a lamb, but my heart still beat with the old rhythm of caution. Then one of them pointed at me, not sharply, not loudly, not startlingly, just a small gesture, so small it should have meant nothing. But to sheep, a raised finger is the same as a wolf's fang. It assigns fate. The gate opened, not wide, just enough for a single body to pass through. I heard the metal creak, heard the ground compress under human feet, heard the flocks breathing slow in unison. I did not run. Sheep do not run from humans. Not because we are brave, but because this is not something instinct prepares us to fight. A rope slipped around my neck, not tight, not painful, but heavy, like the weight of something already decided. I looked around. The flock didn't step back, didn't bleat, didn't stomp. And in that silence, I saw something more terrifying than panic. Acceptance. Acceptance that I was next. Acceptance that they could do nothing. Acceptance that the humans had chosen my path. Before I even understood, there was a choice to make. I stepped through the gate. Not because the rope pulled me, because not stepping wouldn't change anything. The gate closed behind me, a small click, but this time, it didn't sound like a door. It sounded like every road home sealing shut. I didn't look back, not out of strength, but because I knew if I saw my mother's eyes, I would try to run to her. And if I did, I might throw the flock into chaos, make the humans choose another, or worse, force them to use methods no sheep can ever win against. I had to go, not because I wanted to, but because the flock needed me to go. They led me behind the pen, a place that held none of our scent, where the ground didn't know sheep's footsteps, where the wind tasted unfamiliar and cold. I saw a small truck, not frightening, not dirty, no blood, but what made me tremble was the wooden crate inside, just big enough for one sheep. I understood immediately. No one needed to explain. No one needed to speak. This was what the others had stepped into and never returned from. They lowered the crate, opened the lid, gestured. I stood there, on the threshold of two worlds. One side was the flock, the other side a place no one knew. I heard soft footsteps somewhere behind the fence. I didn't look, but I knew it was my mother. Maybe she stood still. Maybe she didn't dare come closer, but I knew she was watching. Sheep do not cry in tears, but the heart cries in another way. Its rhythm breaks. I stepped into the crate. No resistance. No hesitation, not because I wasn't afraid, but because sheep cannot break what humans build. I stepped inside, like a memory leaving the book of the flock. The crate door closed, and I knew from that moment on, I was no longer a sheep of the meadow. I was a sheep belonging to a place, whose name even I did not know. The wooden crate was lifted onto the truck, not roughly, not violently, just a light upward motion, enough for the ground to slip away from my feet. The scenery outside, where my flock still stood, grew smaller, smaller, until it became only a faint white blur behind the crate's slats. I did not bleed. I did not ram the walls. I did not try to go back. Because we sheep understand something everyone else avoids thinking about. Once the gate closes, fate closes with it. The truck left the meadow. The wind no longer smelled like home, no longer smelled like the flock, no longer smelled like my mother. Only the smell of metal, oil, and a cold, sterile scent. The same scent I faintly recognized from the days the others disappeared. I had never seen a slaughterhouse, but my body remembered its smell through the sad eyes of those who once left and never returned. Some fears need no experience. Just witnessing a sheep not come home is enough to know what waits ahead. When the truck stopped, light filtered through the cracks. I heard metal clanging, water spraying, engines humming low, a sliding iron door. No predator's roar, no wind carrying warnings from nature. But these sounds were worse. They were the sounds of inevitability. A human opened the crate. Light flooded into my eyes, so bright I couldn't see their face. They tapped my side gently, signaling me to step out. No shoving, no striking, no force. Their calmness made me tremble more. Wolves attack because they're hungry, but humans kill you. Not out of hatred, not out of hunger, but out of routine. I stepped into a narrow corridor, metal walls on both sides. Cold, clean, silent. I smelled the scent of the ones who went before me. Not the scent of life, the scent of endings. Another iron door opened. Brighter light, the sound of machinery overhead. No one had to explain. No one had to command. I understood. We were born to run from wolves. But in the end, the wolf is not the thing to fear most. The most terrifying one is the one holding your future as part of their daily job. I walked into the final room. No one pushed. No one dragged. I walked on my own, because sheep do not fight fate. We face it with shaky but honest legs. I lifted my head one last time, searching for anything to imprint into memory. The sky over the meadow, the sound of wind, my mother's eyes, the flock's voices, none of it was here. Only the sound of machines preparing. In the brief moment before the light disappeared, I thought of the one thing more painful than death. I would never return, to let the flock know where I had gone. And that is the final story of a sheep like me. No cry, no spray of blood, no chaos, only a life, walking into a place we all know exists, but pretend not to see.